I'm joined now by the communications director for President Obama and the co-host of Pod Save America, Dan Pfeiffer. Dan, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
So we're looking at Donald Trump having eliminated home rule for Washington, D.C. First and foremost, can you convey some of the danger of what we're seeing right now, kind of long term, in terms of what Trump is angling to do by normalizing us to the idea of sending the military into American cities?
Yeah, so Trump has now been president for 7 months or so, and he's now sent the American military into 2 cities.
Yeah, both
times for totally trumped up reasons. Terrible pun there, which I did not intend.
Yeah.
But in both cases, Trump, both in LA during the largely peaceful protests a few months ago, and now in DC, Trump is creating a false pretext to send the U.S. military into places. Like the protests in LA were largely peaceful. DC violent crime is actually down, well, quite low. Historically, it has come down. There's no giant surge of crime that Trump is talking about. He is making decisions either intentionally or unintentionally based on what Fox News and others are saying about what's happening in DC, what's not actually happening. And now you see a situation where, imagine if we were in the year 2020 and the largely peaceful protests about the murder of George Floyd were happening all across the country. What does Trump do there? Does he send U.S. troops to confront those protesters? What does he do the next time the No Kings, a protest like the No Kings Day protest happens? Yeah. Does he find a way to send U.S. troops there to stop those protests, to arrest those protesters? We are headed down a very dangerous path very quickly.
How are you thinking about this in terms of like the 30,000-foot view of, yes, he can quell dissent. He can, if there's protests or any critical movements against him or public voices of dissent. But we've also seen that the guy has tried to seize voting machines back in 2020, and of course there were bulwarks against him. Bill Barr, even Bill Barr of all people, wasn't gonna humor like these insane moves by Trump. But like Bill Barr has been replaced by Pam Bondi now, and so we're in a different world. And so not only does he have no pushback at the DOJ, but if he has boots on the ground, if he has muscle in the different states to be able to do what he already tried to do a few years ago, how are you thinking about the danger of something like that?
Well, I mean, you're exactly right. Where in the first term, the way they sort of thought about managing Trump was Trump would have a crazy idea, and then there'd be a set of people around him who would do everything they could to prevent him from implementing that idea. Pat Cipollone, who was the White House counsel, used to say, if Trump had a crazy idea, I think Cipollone testified this to the January 6th committee. Cipollone would say, let me work on that. I'll get back to you in a week. And by a week, Trump has clearly forgotten it because he has the attention span of a goldfish.
Yeah.
Now, and I think this is really evident in the firing of the Bureau of Labor Statistics director, where Trump clearly woke up, saw the numbers, was pissed, declared he wanted to fire the person. And then everyone around him, instead of trying to prevent him from doing something incredibly stupid and damaging, raced to see who could help him implement his crazy idea first. And so now there is no bulwark inside the government. There is limited bulwark outside the government, because we've seen this from major corporations who are capitulating to Trump left and right. You have chip makers who are now kicking up their profits to the U.S. government as a privilege for avoiding sanctions. You have Tim Cook giving Trump a fake solid gold, real gold, but fake award in the Oval Office just to appease his ego. And you have major institutions like Harvard trying to cut deals with him. And so the only opposition to Trump comes from the grassroots, right? And it comes from the small handful of Democratic elected officials willing to be brave and stand up against him and to sort of amplify and strengthen the grassroots resistance that's happening. But no one is going to stop Trump for us, right? There's no other entity who's going to prevent Trump from doing his most dangerous things. It is only what we can do through popular demonstrations, through using our platforms and our voices to raise awareness of it and make it politically uncomfortable, if not for Trump, but for the people and the other Republicans around him.
So we're watching this breakdown of democracy. We're watching Donald Trump kind of put on full display his authoritarian impulses. But I don't want to fall into the same trap that we fell into in the lead up to 2024, which is we have to protect democracy, because for a lot of people, that just wasn't moving to them, and also the institutions that we're trying to protect aren't working for them, and so why would they want to stand up in defense of an institution that's left them, without good job prospects, without good financial prospects? And so I don't want to fall into that trap. And so how are you thinking about how to reconcile those two things, where we have these egregious attacks against democracy that are worthy of highlighting, but at the same time we've tried that once before, and it's not something that's going to win Democrats elections, and certainly not going to move the vast majority of Americans who aren't really that committed to democracy as it exists right now.
So I think you've hit on what is a very important dynamic over the last couple of years of American politics, which is in the Biden era, we fell into the trap of becoming the defenders of the status quo. We were defending democracy. We were not reforming it. We were not fixing it. We were defending it as it is. And we know from a mountain's worth of polling that people think the political system is not working for them. So when you say you're defending democracy, when you say you act like you're defending the status quo or norms and all those things, you're saying this thing that does not work for you, the best you're possibly going to get from us is the thing that didn't work for you.
Right.
Trump was at least promising something different. People are willing to take on risk for something different. So what do we do in the situation we're in now where Trump is the one in power? So we obviously can't go back to defending the status quo. So we have to do a couple of things in our messaging here. One is we have to make sure that what Trump is now doing is he is the one defending that corrupt political system. He is accumulating power for himself and for his rich friends so that they can make more money and accumulate more power. It is about them because that's what people believe, that politicians are in it for themselves. And everything, single thing Trump is doing is to help himself and to help the people around him. Second thing is we have to find ways to make people understand how these things affect them personally, right? Like how is affecting your life as these things happen. Part of it can also just be Trump is focused on this and he's not focused on that, right? He is doing his made for TV occupation of DC while, as we learned today, core inflation went back up again and costs are going up for you. So he's not, the thing he told you he was going to do, which is to lower your costs, he is not doing. Right. And so I think those are the core elements of the message. And then the sort of longer term thing for Democrats is we have to articulate a vision of people who are going to fix this system. What does it look like? Trump is burning down these institutions, he's done all these things. What are we going to build up next that is more effective and more responsive to regular, average, everyday people, as opposed to the rich, the powerful, and the politically connected?
You know, I think to that exact point, we've seen such obvious instances. Like he's dumbed it down so obviously where he is stripping healthcare away from 17 million Americans, cutting food assistance away from low-income families, cutting jobs for veterans, making energy costs higher at the same time that he's doing that the things he's chosen to do with his time while he's cutting those things are almost like a caricature of themselves, building a $200 million ballroom, gifting himself a $1 billion Qatari jet. And so it's really easy to understand this stuff. It's not like this is convoluted or opaque or nebulous in any way. I mean, this is him literally taking as much as he can away from the poorest Americans while at the same time busying himself with like projects of building himself an opulent ballroom that only he will be able to enjoy.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. Like there's a mountain of data points and evidence to show to make this story. We just have to make it in a compelling and consistent way for people to hear it.
So I want to get your take on how we reconcile two things, which is one, Trump is doing all of this stuff in DC right now, very much wanting to present himself as a strong man. You know, he's had a long time interest in being part of the dictator club, the autocrat club, but at the same time, a lot of the power of the left, at least with regard to the narrative, is not giving him the satisfaction of feeling like a strong man. And so how do you adequately convey the danger of what are very much strongman tendencies and strongman actions that he's taking in DC right now, while also not giving him exactly what he wants, which is this feeling that he is invincible and that he's strong to the Democrats' weakness?
Yeah, this has been a hobby horse of mine for many years now, which is too often in our very sincere communication of the worst possible outcomes of Trump, what we actually end up doing is amplifying what is his political superpower, which is his view that he is strong enough to protect you in a dangerous, chaotic world. That is what, because voters, I know people always scoff at this, but voters are not stupid. Trump's voters are not stupid. Many of them knew exactly what they were getting into, which is they know the guy's kind of crooked. They know the guy's kind of a clown. They don't really love a lot of the things he tweets or truths or says, but they are scared of what is happening in the world, and they think he is strong enough to protect them, right? That was the core contrast that was so effective between Trump and Biden before Biden got out of the race. And so what we don't want to do is we don't want to amplify that strength because that does move people with voters. I think the way that we have to do this, and a lot of times I would tell people, well, you should communicate his weakness, make him look like a clown. And when we can do that, we should, right? Because he does look ridiculous and does dumb things. And so you should do it. But sometimes that is hard, right? And so I think maybe the way to sort of square that circle is to talk about corruption, right? And how he's doing all this for himself, right? He's not doing it to protect you. He's doing it to enrich himself, right? Your costs are going up. It's harder for you to live. The only person getting richer in Donald Trump's America is Donald Trump and his friends, right? He's made billions of dollars since he's been in office, and that's coming at your expense. And try to focus it that way, as opposed to just like as if we sort of howl at the moon about all of the specific dangers of him. We just have to be conscious of the idea that we are amplifying what he views as his core political attribute, which is strength.
Right. I want to move over to the Democrats for a beat here. Do you think that we are seeing a legitimate sea change in terms of Democrats' willingness to actually put themselves on the line and fight? And I ask this with the understanding that historically Democrats are actually quite impotent in the face of Republican abuses and Republican displays of strength. And so, we've seen instances now where we have Gavin Newsom coming out and promising to fight back against this Texas gerrymander. J.B. Pritzker is doing the same thing. Beto has been, on the fight train for quite a long time. Whether you think that this is a legitimate sea change, a permanent sea change now that we're seeing in kind of the soul of the Democratic Party.
I think it is progress. And I think that the people willing to fight and to speak out aggressively and to call things out aggressively are at the forefront, and they're getting the attention and the approbation that a lot of Democrats want. So it's creating an incentive structure for more people to do it. I think this is something Alyssa Slotkin says a lot, which is that the divide in the Democratic Party is not left-right. It's between those who think Trump is an existential threat, like a permanent existential threat, and people who think that Trump is just like a bad president for the next 3.5 years. And the people on the former side of that argument, I think, are winning in the public sphere, whether that's Gavin Newsom or Chris Murphy or AOC or Bernie. And you can go down the list of people who are doing a good job with that stuff. I think Kathy Hochul has actually stepped up, at least is trying to step on the redistricting fight. The test that's coming is government funding runs out at the end of September, right? How are Democrats going to use that leverage in that moment to fight against Trump? And that was where Senator Schumer and some Senate Democrats blinked. And so we'll have to see if that happens again. And so I think we are making progress here. I'm not ready to declare that we fixed all of our problems and we're ready to fight. And I think there's going to be a constant battle here between those two wings I just talked about, between people who want to be very aggressive and people who maybe are a little more risk adverse, who are trying to maybe manage the decline as opposed to fight aggressively in the moment.
Well, there was a big clamoring in 2020 for a return to normalcy, and that's what led Joe Biden to victory in 2020. Do you think that that's going to be the same thing, where Donald, like on one hand, you have somebody like Trump who is just he is a walking, talking hurricane, and this country is just enveloped in chaos and dysfunction, and so I understand the desire for like boring. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's, again, what propelled Biden to win in 2020. But at the same time, now there's this sense of, okay, Trump is not an anomaly. And in fact, the entire Republican Party has been recreated in his mold. And so, at least the tack that I take is like, I don't want boring. I don't want back to normal. I actually want somebody who's going to actually, fight. And so what do you think? I mean, it could go one of two ways. And so what do you think is going to win out as we head toward 2028?
So I'd say a couple of things here. One, with the important stipulation that how people think about the 2020 presidential election is going to change dramatically between now and then. I always remind people that in 2005, after George W. Bush won a somewhat narrow victory, but he made similar gains with core parts of the Democratic coalition. He made some gains with black voters, made some gains with Latino voters. Just like now, people were talking about this permanent Republican majority. And everyone said, every person who had the jobs that you and I have, the political operatives, they said what Democrats need is they need a moderate white guy, probably from the Midwest or the South, right? To kind of go back to the Bill Clinton mode. And everyone believed that. And it was like Mark Warner and Evan Bayh and these people like that. And then 4 years later, we nominated Barack Hussein Obama from the south side of Chicago via Hawaii and Indonesia. And so the world
Yeah.
changes dramatically. So we should stipulate that. And what happens in 2026 midterms will really affect how Democratic primary voters think about the primary. But what I would then I'll say two other things, because I think this is a somewhat complicated question. One is people tend to want the replacement, not the replica. This is a statement from my old friend David Axelrod. And so they usually want the inverse of the person who's in power if they want change. And so for Obama and Bush was like old part of the political establishment, or old by those days, like old news, not. I mean, he's a whippersnapper by today. Yeah, in the gerontocracy of the 2020s. Yeah. But he was impetuous and he went off to war without thinking about it. And he kind of was like an anti-intellectual. And so Obama, being this like thoughtful, smart guy who was from outside of Washington, that was the inverse. But the inverse of Trump doesn't have to be boring. And I think we really did misread the 2020 election. People did not want to return to normalcy in the way we thought about it. They were just choosing between the immediate past of Trump in the middle of a pandemic and the recent past of Joe Biden in the Obama era. And that's not what this election is going to be about. And Biden, under those circumstances, with a raging pandemic, where Trump was just killing people through his own incompetence, won by 40,000 votes over a handful of states. So to think that was some sort of mandate for normalcy was a gigantic error on all of our parts. And Biden was able to be, quote unquote, boring and win in a media environment where everyone was locked in their houses and watching television, where you didn't campaign in the same way. So whoever our nominee is going to be, I think cannot be boring, because you have to get attention, right? I think one of the core elements of electability is not just going to be their approval numbers or their bio or what swing states they can bring. It's, can they navigate this media environment? Do they have the capacity to drive attention, to get attention, to go on everything from Brian Tyler Cohen to Rogan and do well, right? Yeah. And so I think boring is not an option in this world. What not boring looks like, that could be like extremely pugnacious. It could be slightly less it could be like a calmer temperament, like Pete Buttigieg often has. It could, or Josh Shapiro or Gretchen Whitmer. It could be, as pugnacious as JB Pritzker and Gavin Newsom. We don't really know that, but I think I don't think anyone is going to successfully run on a return to pre-Trump normalcy and a return. And it was the thing that Michael Bennett, when he was running for president, said is like, would it be nice if we could wake up every day and not think about our president? Like that was his sort of his pitch, and that everyone found that very appealing in the moment Trump is president. I don't think that is a viable model in 2028.
Right. Well,
that was a long rant to your relatively simple question.
No, but it makes sense, and I think it's worth asking also who at least as of right now, and again with the caveat that everything can change tomorrow. I don't think anybody in January of 2020 knew that by March we would all be in a raging pandemic. So with that throat clearing aside, who is the model in this moment of who you think has a successful idea of what a Democrat could and should be as we head toward 28?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think it is too early to say. I don't think anyone has yet, of the people who were thinking of running, has either shown themselves to be a clear superstar who could dominate this, or shown themselves as someone who doesn't have what it takes. Like, we just don't know, because the glare of a presidential campaign is like nothing else. Running for governor of a major state is T-ball, and presidential elections are Major League's Game 7 of the World Series. Look at Ron DeSantis as your example. Yeah. Ron DeSantis was an incredibly successful, in the worst ways possible, governor of Florida, one of the most important and largest states in America. If you had asked every Republican before then to say, who's the one person not named Donald Trump most likely to be the next president of the United States, they all would have picked Ron DeSantis. He gets in the presidential campaign and face plants in a second. Doesn't have the toughness, the charisma, the stage presence to handle himself at all. So we don't know how some of these Democrats who seem awesome right now will navigate that. And we don't know if some of these Democrats who may not seem as awesome will rise to the occasion. Like, who's the Pete Buttigieg of this race, right? As someone who starts at nothing that no one knows, and then all of a sudden is a real contender for the nomination at the end. We just don't know that yet. So I'm coming into this with a very open mind. What I am really watching people for is, do they have what it takes to navigate the media environment? I think we can't nominate someone who doesn't have that.
Yeah. Completely agree. Well, to that point, I mean, when it comes to the media, look, it doesn't get better for everybody watching right now. If you're not already subscribed to Pod Save America's YouTube channel, it does not get better than them. They are in large part the reason that I do what I do now. And Dan is somebody who, I hang on his every word. If you're not yet signed up for Messagebox, that's his Substack. I'll put that in the post description of this video, and I'll put the link to Pod Save America right here on the screen and also in the post description as well. Highly recommend that if you're not yet subscribed, that you go ahead and subscribe. Help elevate the voices of everybody who's doing this work in the progressive media ecosystem. Dan, appreciate your time.
Thank you, Brian. Great to talk to you as always.